someone asked me about, is there MAGA without Donald Trump? I think the answer on Sunday was, yeah. I mean, boy. Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Monday, September 22nd. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bavin and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, Sunday memorial service for Charlie Kirk was held at the State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. It was hosted by Turning Point USA, and it featured appearances by many top Trump administration officials. But the main event was certainly a speech by Charlie Kirk's widow, Erika Kirk. I want to play something she said, and then I'm going to play some comments from President Trump from the event as well. So here's Erika Kirk.
Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do. That man, that young man, I forgive him. I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do. The answer to hate is not hate. The answer we know from the gospel is love, and always love. Love for our enemies and love for those who persecute us.
So that was Erika Kirk. And here's President Trump speaking after her.
He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erika. But now Erika can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent. Charlie's angry. Looking down, he's angry at me now.
So, Tom, pretty incredible event. What do you make of the day? And what about these two very different messages coming from Erika Kirk and Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Erika Kirk, that moment that you played, and it's even more dramatic on video. She's, crying, and it was a remarkable moment. And that is the sort of essence of being a Christian. And she demonstrated it in front of, millions upon millions of people who were there in person, but also watching around the globe. And then Trump came afterwards and sort of, stepped on that. And Trump is Trump, and he's going to say what he says. Someone said earlier that in some ways it was, this highlighted what a Christian Charlie was by Trump saying that, and even Tucker Carlson in his remarks, he said he had in private conversations with Charlie Kirk that he had this compartment in his heart where he hated his enemies, but Charlie never did. He always said that person's a broken person, someone who needs to find Christ. So Trump wasn't the only one who said that, but it did sort of step on her message, number one. It did also allow the media, particularly sort of the left-leaning media, and I posted a screenshot of the Huffington Post, for example, who said that this was a, rage-filled revenge, hate-mongering, memorial, allowed them to run with that narrative, despite the fact that most of the speeches, excluding those one or two lines, were all about love and compassion and temperance and civility and all of these things, and about Christ. I mean, it was a very sort of Christ-centered service. And the other thing that I would say is, just as a political matter, I mean, I watched a lot of it. I didn't watch everything, but I watched a lot of it. And you could tell, even from before the official service started, that this was a remarkable event, that it was, obviously everyone was there to memorialize Charlie and remember Charlie, but it was way bigger than him, right? This was and I think Democrats, and I posted this, I said, Democrats who have refused to offer any grace to Charlie Kirk or his family, I think they've misread the moment politically. And because I think what I took away from yesterday is that this is way bigger than just Charlie Kirk, and it is an event that's going to reverberate through our politics for some time.
Well, I watched most of the service, Andy, and I want to amplify something Tom said, which is that coverage that he's talking about that kind of irresponsible and really inaccurate coverage it's quite likely what got Charlie Kirk killed. We've seen these stories that have come out in the Washington Post and the New York Times. They've gotten hold of some of the things the accused shooter wrote, and he said that he was mad at Charlie Kirk because he was tired of the hate. But Charlie Kirk never preached hate, and people who say he did who lied about what his message was are partially responsible for this. And to say so even afterwards, to me, is obscene. So I'll say that. The other thing I'll say is that I'm working my way from bad to good. The second thing I'd say is that, Donald Trump, as a speaker, never fails to disappoint. I mean, he just, and I'm like Charlie Brown in this football that I always hope he'll rise to the occasion, and he never does. And all he had to do was say about half of what he said, speak about half as long as he spoke, cut out all the partisan gibberish, cut out the nonsense about the tariffs, cut out the insane things he said about before he came along, Republicans got 4% of the under 30 vote, and he got half of it.
He took about a 4-minute detour into his autism announcement today, too, which I was like,
just to set the record straight, Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan got about between 55 and 60% of the under 30 vote. I mean, this is just not. It's just not accurate. You don't expect a person to just tell tall tales at a eulogy. That was distracting, to say the least. But the last thing I would say, and I was struck, as Tom was, by Erika Kirk, and it reminded me of the parishioners at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, who said something very similar about the killer, the man who went in there and sat with these people and then murdered them for their race. I mean, one of the most heinous crimes in American history. And most of the people, there was a film made, and several of the parishioners, most of them said that they forgave the killer. That is the Christian message. And it is a hard, people talk the talk, but that's walking the walk, and it's very hard to do. And I found it very moving what she said.
Yeah, I got to say, and the reason the two obvious, I think, clips to play from that event, I don't think it misrepresents at all the president. I will say that. To Carl's point, he never fails to disappoint. And to me, this was a moment when the less said, the better. And to sort of call her out and sort of make specific reference to that part of her message, and then sort of make a very a joke of it, really. I thought it was, even for Trump, I was kind of shocked, Tom. I don't know if you felt the same way, but I thought it was sort of remarkable, which is why I played the clip.
Yeah, look, someone said that, all of these folks had time limits, but Trump did not. And because that's the way, Charlie would have wanted it. Trump gets to speak as much as he wants. And people were talking about, I posted something yesterday about this, the autism. I mean, he went off on this, sort of jag, taking time to preview his announcement that's going to take place or took place today in the Oval Office. And it just was out of place, in my opinion. And I said as much, and people were, I caught some flack online. People were saying it's the weave, this is what Trump does. And Charlie Kirk cared about autism, therefore it was relevant. I mean, trying to rationalize and make excuses for why he should have said this, or he wasn't out of line saying it. I will say, if you go back and look at all of the different remarks that were made that day, I thought probably among the best, and there were a number of good speakers and obviously high profile speakers, but Marco Rubio is just so impressive. The way that he commanded the stage, and in some ways, to me, he had a little bit of a different take on it. A lot of people were saying this sort of the same thing, same themes, and Rubio's, which very much fit in with his experience. And if you go back to the way that he campaigned for president in 2016, talking about sort of American exceptionalism, I just thought it was a standout speech. And again, there were a lot of good speakers. JD Vance was great. I thought, but Marco Rubio is at the top of the list for me.
You know, Tom, it's not bad to have some levity at a funeral, funeral service.
Sure.
But Don Jr. provided it. He actually made some jokes kind of at his father's expense, and then did this imitation of his father, which was, pretty good. And so there, it didn't have to all be heavy, but it all had to be about Charlie Kirk, and it had to be about our feelings about basically having a person attacked for daring to speak to the other side, and for trying to engage the other side.
Well, that leads me right to what struck me about it too. I want to play something that Tulsi Gabbard.
Charlie lived what our founders envisioned: freedom, the right to speak even when we disagree. Freedom. I may not agree with what you say, but I will fight to defend to the death with my very life your right to speak. Free speech is the foundation of our democratic republic. We must protect it at all costs, because without it, we'll be lost.
So, Carl, that was, of course, Tulsi Gabbard. Director.
Amen, sister.
Right. But this was kind of viewed as a break with the Trump administration, with the president himself, in some sense, who has recently been talking about using the FCC and other government agencies to go after speech that criticizes him. I'm going to play one more clip, and this is the last clip of the show. Yeah. I want you to hear what Ted Cruz of Texas said on a podcast on Friday. This is about talking about the FCC chair, Brendan Carr.
He says, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. If the government gets in the business of saying, we don't like what you, the media, have said, we're going to ban you from the airwaves if you don't say what we like. That will end up bad for conservatives. It reminds me of, you and I are both fans of The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
J.R.R. Tolkien. It reminds me of like the Ring of Power. And it is so attractive. It's sort of like conservatives saying, wait, if we have government, we have power. Yeah. We can ban the media. Let me tell you what will happen. Going down this road, there will come a time when a Democrat wins again.
I love the accent.
He's got to work on it. You might want to keep his day job
a little bit. Nice try, but
Martin Scorsese is not going to cast him anytime soon.
Yeah, but pretty interesting coming from Ted Cruz. Wall Street Journal called it his finest hour. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I hear you, Andy, and I do not know for sure Tulsi Gabbard's I'm not sure what Tulsi Gabbard said was aimed at the Trump administration's newfound love of censorship, but Ted Cruz certainly was. And this is something, we talked about this last year on the podcast. I thought and continue to think that censorship was a hidden issue in the campaign. It helped the Republicans win. You had, I remember that debate with J.D. Vance and who did he debate?
Tim Walz.
Tim Walz, yeah. Quickly they forget. And Walz wanted to make a big issue that J.D. Vance had aligned himself with the election deniers. And Vance never had. He'd always steered clear of that issue in a very deft manner. But Walz called him out on it. And Walz's point was that you can't have a democracy, you can't have elective Republican form of government if people standing for office won't accept the outcome if they lose, which is Donald Trump did, and Stacey Abrams and other people. And I thought that's a point that the ticket was vulnerable on, and Vance knew it, but he didn't really contest that point. But he said he turned it around and he said, "Well, what I'm more worried about," he essentially said, "is censorship. Is the establishment media, the Democrats, the left trying to censor." And so to think that they have only been in office, what is this, 8 months in? They're already now throwing that out the window and just going after their enemies exactly the way it was done to them. Remember, Trump was kicked off Twitter when he was the sitting president of the United States. I can't tell you how outrageous that is. And we got used to it. We shouldn't have gotten used to it. And now that they want to do the same thing. What Jimmy Kimmel said the other day, by the way, about the Charlie Kirk shooter was not only vile, he has this sneering contempt for half the country, and he's had for 5 years. But it was misinformation. He was lying, and he deserved to be taken off the air, but not by the government. This is what Ted Cruz is saying. It's what it was what Donald Trump was saying when he was running for office. It was what J.D. Vance said. And I guess that is what Tulsi Gabbard was saying. And boy, you hope that their feet should be held to the fire on this by everyone: liberals, moderates, conservatives, independents.
Well, Tom, is there a split in the conservative movement on this issue, you think? And is it all the way to the White House?
I don't know how much of a split there is. I do think, to Carl's point, there are some people who are, I think their desire for revenge and, and to apply the same standards and rules to the other side have been applied to them. There's a school of thought that that's the only way that this ends, right? Is if you subject the left to the same rules that they've been using against the right for years and years, right? And only when they feel that pain, only when they feel those consequences will they relent and say, okay, we get it now, okay, and call a truce. So, I don't know if that's true or not, but it certainly does, and it certainly seems like we now have, the shoe is on the other foot. Democrats are big champions of free speech, but to Carl's point, they were using the heavy hand of government to silence Trump and the Twitter files and all the COVID misinformation stuff. I mean, it was outrageous how eagerly Democrats and, as Carl likes to point out, journalists were eager to censor and other points of view. And I don't think Republicans they're not as eager to do that, but I think there are some of them that are relishing the idea that Democrats are now getting a little taste of their own medicine.
Today, the Trump administration announced there is a possible link between autism and the use of the pain reliever acetaminophen. I'm not saying that right.
Just say Tylenol.
It's Tylenol, right, by pregnant women. The makers of Tylenol say the drug is safe for use during pregnancy. Carl, what do we know about this really, and who should we trust on this one?
Well, there's a scientist, I think his name is William Parker. He was a lonely voice on this. And Real Clear Investigation did a piece by him. He wrote a first-person piece 6 or 7 years ago. And this has been his theory. Now, his theory was not prenatal use of acetaminophen by women. It was the use of this painkiller in small children. And you, Andy, you, me, Tom, all of us, I mean, we've got 11 kids between us. Every doctor, every pediatrician we ever had, when the kids had a bad fever and they were infants, they were given Tylenol. And there's this guy has a theory that he can't prove it, but it's correlative because the spike in autism begins about the time Tylenol replaces aspirin. He's done some other studies. There's other components to it. He sometimes thinks he was written that sometimes it's in combination with vaccines. Other times he says there's a genetic component. Truth is, we don't know. And the Trump administration, because of Bobby Kennedy's fixation on this issue, is sort of opening up the research to it. But I think it seems too pat an answer, actually, to most people and most medical professionals.
I mean, Tylenol, Tom, introduced 1955, available without a prescription since 1960. It's been around for a long time. People have been using it a lot of ways, different ways. And while Carl says we don't know, I think the scientific consensus at this point is that there is no connection. Maybe that'll change, but what do you make of it right now?
Well, and I urge everyone to go to RealClearPolitics.com or Real Clear Investigations or Google search for this William Parker piece, because, I mean, there are a couple of things. Number one, he has the graph in there. I mean, it's indisputable that, in 1970, there were, I think, four cases of autism per 100,000. Now it's over 100. So we've had a massive, massive increase. Now, some people say, well, that's just because, there's more awareness and the parameters, have changed and been.
Well, the diagnostics have changed. Tom.
Yeah, and become more inclusive. And that's fine. That may explain some of it, but definitely doesn't explain all of it. And so I think it's good that the government is asking questions, but we want them to do it responsibly. The other thing that this William Parker piece, which you go through and read it, I mean, it holds up pretty well. I thought it was very measured. It wasn't, making outlandish claims, but also said that, what they've found is some studies have shown that because not every child, obviously, who's taken Tylenol, every little infant who's taken Tylenol over the last 50 years developed autism.
No, 95% of American children take Tylenol at some point in their lives. So,
correct. But I mean, Parker's theory is that some of them have this reaction, right, based on genetics, that creates basically this compound that starts attacking brain tissue, and that's what leads to autism. So again, I think more investigation is warranted, but I do think we should be exploring what is the cause. To just say, "Oh, gee, we don't know what it is," and we just throw up our hands. I don't think that's the answer. So I applaud RFK Jr. and the Trump administration for at least trying to dig into this and find out what's going on and where there might be links and what might be potential causes so that we can address them.
Yeah. Well, Trump, in his talking about this, at least before today, said this was going to be the answer to autism. He said
that's
finding would, so we won't let it happen anymore, and how to get at least somewhat better when you have it, so that parents can help their child. A little bit of over delivery, I guess, or over promising and overhyping. But Carl, the other thing is, does this mean vaccines are off the hook? I mean, if it's, if this is the answer to autism, maybe the vaccines are okay.
Or maybe vaccines are next in the barrel. Listen, this experiment of having a non-medical person running HHS, I'm a little worried. They could go the other, the pendulum swings, but this in science and in politics, but to have this be the definitive answer, what are they going to do when the autism rates don't come down? I mean, then what?
So on Sunday, guys, Britain, Canada, and Australia announced formal recognition of the state of Palestine. Portugal did the same later that day. France is expected to follow suit, maybe even tonight, but all in advance of this sort of 80th General Assembly meeting of the United Nations, which is happening in New York starting Tuesday, tomorrow. Carl, there are already 140 members of the UN which recognize a Palestinian state. The U.S. and Israel may soon be the only real holdouts. What do you make of the trend? And what do you make of the fact that these are our European allies who are now lining up the way they are?
Well, it's capitulation, and it's disappointing, and more than disappointing. Terrorists go into a country, cross a border, slaughter 1,200 civilians, rape women, 250 hostages, like something out of Conan the Barbarian. And the reward is they get a country. Yeah, what does that tell you? What are the incentives there? The other thing that it's really troubling about it is what kind of country is this? What's their constitution? Is it Hamas runs Gaza? Hamas's charter calls for the elimination of Israel and killing of Jews. Do they have a constitution that guarantees human rights, women the vote, equal rights? Does it do all of the things? Right, gay rights? Does it do all these things that these European democracies claim they care about, or is it just virtue signaling and trying to keep their own immigrant base at bay? Force Israel to do something that's against its own interests. I can't. If the United States and Israel are alone, that doesn't mean we're wrong.
Tom, this is how a Canadian government official explained the move to CNN, at least what our neighbors to the north are thinking. He said the Palestinian Authority has renounced violence, has recognized Israel, and is committed to the two-state solution. We are recognizing the state of Palestine in order to empower those who seek peaceful coexistence and marginalize Hamas. What do you make?
Wait 1 second before Tom weighs in. 1 second, I'm going to say something about that. Sorry, Tommy. They haven't had, the Palestinian Authority hasn't had elections in years in the West Bank because they would lose to Hamas. So how does this marginalize Hamas? I'm sorry, Tommy.
No, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, this is absurd. right? This idea that the Palestinian Authority has recognized, Israel's right to exist. Look,
they still pay terrorist bounties.
To Carl's point, we ran a couple pieces on this on the front page. We ran one from The Guardian, Nesrin Malik, which was a left-wing piece saying, look, Palestine, Gaza needs more than just recognition. They need action, right? That this is just words and they need more aid and more assistance. That was the sort of left point of view. The right point of view we ran from Brendan O'Neill in Spike magazine, and this is his intro. If you want a state, kill some Jews. That's the sick message Sir Keir Starmer has just broadcast to the world. And I think that's Carl's point. I think that's a lot of people's point. And I think even worse, there's now talk that, Netanyahu vows that he's going to retaliate against this, and he's being encouraged to retaliate and take over the West Bank, annex it. And then, Europe said, well, if Israel does anything to retaliate, then we're going to retaliate back against them and we'll impose sanctions and the like. So they've managed to take a bad situation and make it 10 times worse and really set off a spiral and a cycle here that I fear is going to end badly.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because, Trump was just there with the prime minister of the UK. And this is one of the things that they talked about disagreeing about. It seemed like our influence over our European allies, at least when it came to NATO and Ukraine and things like that, tariffs was growing. This is one issue where they have sort of in lockstep now resisted what the United States wants. Carl, am I making too much of that? Or why is this the issue where the Europeans have decided to
Well, yeah, what they'd like to, they're thinking they're not doing it to buck us necessarily. Their thinking is that there has to be a solution. And the only solution they can think of is a two-state solution. Hamas tried to take that off the table. Hamas
and so they're going to try and impose it from outside on Israel. I mean,
Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution. That has been offered to the Palestinians over and over again, including when I covered extensively when Bill Clinton was leaving office, and they rejected it. They said no. That's never what they've wanted. So the Europeans, their default position is appeasement. Has been for 80 years, or well, they're just doing their thing.
What about the Israeli response, Carl? They responded. Bibi Netanyahu has said that he will annex the West Bank if I guess.
Well, that would not be helpful.
But is that more likely because of this, or is that just an independent phenomenon?
I don't know, man. I'm I'm going back to Donald Trump's plan to take the Gazans out of Gaza, rebuild it, and make it into Vegas or the Riviera or something. Nobody has the answer, Andy. This thing could get a lot worse before it gets better.
We're joined now by Phil Wegmann, our White House correspondent. Phil, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
Well, it's always good to have you here. And this is a kind of fun thing because we're all here together, which is a rare thing, even in real life, for the four of us to get together. So, but let's start, we want to go back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show, the Charlie Kirk memorial. What's your take on that? And what's the take on the White House today? Do they view it as a success, or are they talking about it at all?
It's as successful as a somber moment can be. What I was struck by from that memorial is that it very much was a celebration of Charlie's life. And that sounds like a gimmick. We hear it all the time when people try and rebrand funerals, but front and center, from Tucker Carlson to Vice President J.D. Vance, these guys use this as an opportunity, yes, to speak to Charlie's work, but to speak to what was most important to him. Charlie Kirk was an avowed Christian, and each of them shared their testimony. They made an explicitly Christian argument for the good life. And you had all of the biggest folks in Trump's orbit right there for that moment. One thing that, is sort of interesting in this, political theology question is you had Erika Kirk deliver a speech that I don't know how it's humanly possible to do that, to stand on stage at your husband's memorial and forgive the killer, which, as Christians, we're we have an exhortation to, forgive those who oppress us. And she gave this very beautiful eulogy for her husband. And then not 20 minutes later, you had Donald Trump come to the stage and he said, yeah, I don't forgive my enemies. And I'm going to go after them and I'm going to destroy them. That was a split screen here. And it's going to be telling which message do Republicans take forward? Is it the bare knuckled one that Donald Trump delivered? Or is it the one of peace?
I can answer that one for you, Phil, because Donald Trump never changes. He has not changed. He will not change. He's been successful being who he is. So at least for the next 3 years, it's going to be I hate my political enemies and don't want to see them do well. Beyond that, I think there's, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, there's a chance whoever leads the party beyond Donald Trump could take a more Christian approach.
And is it total war here where you have the message of Stephen Miller that we're going to destroy our enemies in the left? Or is there something more to this call for unity?
Yeah. Well, that, Phil, you made me think of something because I was at a wedding this past weekend, a bunch of people, and someone asked me about, is there MAGA without Donald Trump, which I hadn't thought about it in a while. That question hadn't come up. But I think the answer on Sunday was, yeah. I mean, boy, really got the feeling that there was a MAGA movement. And even, a lot of us have focused, I guess, because we focused earlier on the show on this idea of the sort of the Christian part of the coalition and then the Donald Trump sort of going off in his own direction here. It seemed that the weight of the moment was really on that Christian message. And that's part of what made Donald Trump's remarks stand out so much, is because it was really out of touch with a lot of what, other people were saying from the stage.
That and him plugging that there was going to be a major announcement about autism coming.
That's right.
I mean, it was pretty strange.
It's the weave, Phil.
Yeah. It's the weave. You raise a really good question. It's one that Ben Shapiro asked me, I think last summer, when I was asking him about the future of Trumpism without Trump. And he responded that was a little bit like asking what compassionate conservatism is without without George W. Bush. His answer, sort of course, was that this is a phenomenon that begins and ends with one man. But I agree with you, Andy. I don't think that's true. I think that populism is going to outrun Donald Trump even when he's back at the golf course.
Let's talk a little bit about tomorrow, Tuesday. The president is going to the United Nations. He's going to speak, walking into this sort of moment of recognition of the Palestinian state by a bunch of our European allies and Canada, and 140 other countries already have lined up. What do you hear about what the president is going to say tomorrow?
So I think that Donald Trump, while he has taken the United States out of UNESCO and the World Health Organization, I think the reason why he's not going to pull the United States out of the United Nations entirely is because he loves these moments. They're as close to World Wrestling as he can get. This will be his 5th address at the United Nations, and each time he shoves it in their faces, every single time. The most prominent example is when at the United Nations, he said that the future belonged to patriots, not globalists. That was his quote there. And he's, in retrospect, gotten one over on that body. I'm thinking of the 2019 address where he called out the German delegation for buddying up to Vladimir Putin and Russia and accepting all of their oil. And he warned them that they were going to become dependent. And of course, there is this now famous clip of those German diplomats laughing. Well, turns out he was right. They were wrong. These speeches, they're level setting for Donald Trump. It's an opportunity for him to return to his favorite argument.
Well, I think he's going to have to address this issue that we discussed in the previous segment about Israel and Israel being isolated and these countries, basically wanting to recognize terrorists and give them their state. He's going to have to talk about that. And I think he's got the high ground. I don't know what he'll do with it. As I said earlier in this show, he never fails to disappoint
talk about autism.
Yeah. Well, Trump's a little bit on the spectrum, but not in the way we've been talking about.
Tom, we pay about 22% of the UN budget, and we're in arrears. We owe them about $800 million, apparently, according to the UN. So their annual budget, $3.5 billion, we're 22%. They've got a little bit of a fiscal crisis even without us not paying the 2026 budget. As I was looking at it, there's about a 20% cut they're trying to make in their staff. So it's kind of a Doge-like moment for the UN. I wouldn't be surprised if the president makes some mention of that. And, really the fundamental question is why are we still doing this?
Well, they could cut the Hamas workers from the budget. The people who keep showing up, turned out they belonged to Hamas and they were doing humanitarian aid in Gaza. We could start there if you're going to do layoffs, Andy.
It would be awesome if Trump went in there and said, you know what? That's it. We're done. We're pulling the plug on you guys. It's over. You guys find another place. Get out of New York. And we're not paying for any of this stuff anymore. I mean, the UN is one of the least effective, most, I was going to say pernicious, but that's probably not the proper word, but certainly a bastion of anti-Semitism. I mean, this is an organization that, it just, they've got like Iran and North Korea on the Human Rights Council and crap like that. I mean, it's absurd. It's an absurdity. And, I think it's sort of long outlived its usefulness. And it would be awesome if Trump went in there, if you want to make real news, if you wanted this to be as Phil said, like a level setting speech, he could go in there and just,
it's a little more than
drop the hammer and abolish the place.
Paris Accord, Tom. It's more repercussions than that.
Although my favorite story.
Do you think Trump cares about that, Carl? Come on, give me a break.
No, I said it's more than doing that. It's not like doing that.
My favorite story to come out of this UN delegation speech is all of the restrictions that the administration has put on the Iranian diplomats. This includes that they have to run past the United States any purchases that they make at foreign duty stores, and they are banned from going to outlet stores like Costco. So we're really showing the Iranians. The Associated Press reported that. But no, I mean, I think that whether you love the United Nations or you don't, Trump is pulling the rug out from underneath them. What are they going to do without the United States? Are they going to move their headquarters to Nairobi or Brussels? They need the U.S. And without this country, they're even more toothless than they already are.
It's so funny because when I was a kid, we used to trick or treat for UNICEF. I don't know if anyone else did that, but you.
Me too.
You got these little boxes.
Still do it, yeah.
Still do it. And you would go out and people would give you pennies for UNICEF and you send it in. And the UN was really popular. Gallup just did a poll. They just released from August. 2/3 of the American people, Phil, think that the UN does a bad job at its keeping global peace. Only 1/3 of Americans sort of support it. That makes me think that Tom may be onto something. This isn't quite, an 80-20 issue, but it's moving in that direction. And maybe the American people are done with the UN and would applaud such a move.
And how often does the everyday American think about the United Nations? Not that often. I think that this is likely a symptom of this larger pull away from the institutions. But more than that, the one interaction that most Americans had with the United Nations was with the World Health Organization during that pandemic that we had those 5 years ago. And what did they see? Well, it was pretty apparent that Dr. Tedros, who led the World Health Organization, but is not a doctor, was cozying up to China. He was allowing them to be less than honest with the rest of the global community. And in fact, I remember putting this question pretty pointedly to Dr. Fauci earlier on in the pandemic, and he bristled. He did not like that, and he erupted. But I think that the record shows that Dr. Tedros and the World Health Organization did not cover themselves in glory, and I suspect that maybe that's part of the reason why Americans are losing faith in this storied and faraway organization.
Andy, my birthday is October 24th. That's United Nations Day, and you're making me think I can't brag about that.
But because of what Phil said, because of the things that I said, the United Nations has they've squandered trust. They've squandered credibility over the years with all this absurdity. And so it's no wonder that they're not held in, I was going to say high esteem, but maybe any esteem anymore.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're going to have to leave it there. You're listening you've been listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. That's our program for today. I'm Andrew Walworth. I've been here with Tom Bevan, Carl Cannon, and Phil Wegmann. We'll be back here tomorrow. Hope to see you then. Have a great evening.